Hey guys, Sam here at NA Studios. Thanks so much for stopping by and checking the video out. Today I want to take a look at vocal layering, vocal production, creating massive sounds with vocal tracks, harmonies, and creating a real soundscape with a voice. Now we're going to go a little bit into the what and a little bit into the why and how. We're going to take a look at microphone technique, take a look at the music theory behind this, and then a little bit about how I'm processing these vocals. So what plugins I'm using, what kind of effects I'm using on these vocals to get this massive sound. I'm going to take it from a solo vocal, which sounds like this. Again! And turn it into a stereo soundscape that sounds like this. Again! So as you can hear, there's a massive difference there, and there's a fair amount that goes into this technique, but it's something that you hear so much on any kind of genre. You hear it in pop, you hear it on 80s power metal, you hear it on so many different genres, that enormous chorus vocal effect that really spreads out across the speakers throughout the headphones, and it's worth taking a look in depth at how you can create this at home with what you have in your studio. So let's jump in and take a look. So this technique involves a little bit of know-how on your DAW. I'm using Logic for this. We're using 12 separate tracks to spread across this full soundscape, and we're doing different notes relative to the key of the song. You can follow along with this. I'm going to include kind of sheet music notation of this so you can see exactly what I'm doing. You don't need a grade 8 in music theory to know this. It's going to be relatively simple, but it's important to know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So first off then, let's take a listen to the first vocal line, the one that you heard in the before example. In each of these examples, I'm doing 2 of each. So I like to double my vocal lines. Every single set of notes that you hear will be doubled. So first off, we've got essentially the root notes, and this is going from a G up to an A. So this is kind of at maybe the top of the vocal tenor range. Let's just take a listen to these two on their own. Again! Okay, so just 2 notes there, G, G, A. It's just the root. That's home essentially. That's what we're basing everything around. We're starting off from the G and then we're going up to the A. Now these 2 notes are pretty nondescript. There's nothing magnificent sung about them. I've sung them myself. I know they don't sound magnificent, but I'm panning these just slightly to the left and right. So nothing here other than the really low stuff, which we'll see in a moment. Nothing is panned completely centrally, because that's where the lead vocal normally sits. We're talking about real background vocals here. These are our backups. These are the real soundscape kind of choral stuff. If you're including your lead vocal in this, then you can pan it centrally. Just see what I'm doing and adapt it to your situation. So after we've got that, then we've got a mid version as well. So let's take a listen to this. This is slightly different. This is going for a D and an E. So in comparison to the G and A, we're now singing what is essentially the perfect fifth above those 2, but we're doing it the octave below. But you can still think of it as the perfect fifth. Again. Again. So when you get those 2 together, again, you get a fairly familiar sound. That perfect fifth, we all know that sound. It's the guitarist's power chord. It's a really common harmony for backing vocalists to be singing. So next I'm doing the major third in this chord. So this is the B and then going up to the C sharp. So we're starting off with G, B, D, the major triad of G major, and then we're going up to E, A and C sharp. So that's the major triad of A major. Take a listen to these just on their own, and then I'll put them in with the others and you'll hear that major triad just move up. Again. Fairly nondescript on its own, but once you bring everything in, you get the major triad. Again. So we're going from a chord of G major, and then we're going up to a chord of A major. This is really simple kind of music theory stuff. If you're not too strong with music theory, stick with this. I'm not going to go into anything too detailed. Just know that there we've got 3 degrees of the scale. We've got the 1st, the 3rd and the 5th. And those are the 3 most prominent degrees of the scale. So after we do that, what do we need to do? Well, Those 3 takes there, the first, the third and the fifth, they've all been sung through the same microphone in the same position, about 6 inches away from the microphone, so they get a fairly familiar sound. Well, I've gone for something different on top here. I've gone for a falsetto vocal, so that's in the male really high register, and it's a really gentle note, but I've backed off from the microphone. I'm about 18 inches away from the mic. The reason that I've done this is that if you're creating vocal stacks with the same microphone, it can occasionally get a bit piercing. If you've got a microphone that has a certain peak in a specific area, then that peak is amplified across the full spectrum once you get 12 takes in, as I have here. So that can be an issue. So a really good tip when you're creating these vocal layers is, on a few of them, just step back a touch. On some of them, be a normal distance away, and on some others, as we'll see in a moment, get really close. It can really change the sound of the microphone and the sound of those takes. If you're changing how far away you are from the microphone, if you're changing your position relative to the microphone, even try some different pickup patterns, try singing behind it, whatever it is that makes it a little bit different. So this is the falsetto then, and this is singing the same notes as the original high vocal, the G up to the A, but it's the octave above. Okay, a fairly inexpensive sounding recording. And if we listen to that with the original, we'll just hear 2 notes the octave apart from each other. Again. But crucially, these falsetto parts are panned hard left and right. So if we take a listen to these, they're really wide. They're in the far left and right. They're not down the centre at all. I like to take the philosophy of the stereo spectrum being like a mix. Even when you're talking about just vocals, you tend to have your bass in the center, so your kick drum and your low end is going to be in the center. Then your cymbals or maybe your highs of your synths are going to be out far to the sides. I like to do the same thing with vocal stacks, vocal layering. I'll have all my low end stuff further down the center than anywhere else, and my higher stuff will be out to the sides. If we take a look at that low harmony that we had before, you'll see that these ones are panned fairly centrally. Take a listen to these with the falsetto vocals. Again. And then take a listen to the mid in there as well. These are a little bit higher than these ones, so they're coming out to the ends a little bit further. Again. So with those 4 vocal notes in there, we're starting to get a little bit of that stereophony. We're starting to get a little bit of stuff spread out to the left and right hand side. When we start to bring some plugins into this, you're really going to hear a difference, and you're going to see exactly why it is that I pan stuff so wide. This next one, though, is a bit of a wild card because it's not really sticking to that root note 3rd and 5th. I'm actually starting off on an A here, which is the root note of the song, if we're calling it that, and then I'm coming down to an E. So going from a major triad, the G major chord that we had there in the first instance, I'm singing an A on the top, so it's kind of making it into a G9 chord when you've got the 9th on the top. Just take a listen to this falsetto on top of the original vocal, and it has a very unique flavour. It sounds a little discordant when you play them on their own, but when you bring it in with everything else, it almost puts you on edge a little bit, having that 9th on the top, because you've essentially got the G, A and B in different octaves, but they're all there. But then because it all resolves to that A major triad, it feels like home. It adds a little bit of suspense, and then it comes down to that home place of the A major triad. Take a listen to it one more time. Again. So that A major, the last note, that is home, and that all resolves just to there. Now, next up, I've got some real low stuff. Now, my voice is quite a high tenor voice. I tend to sing in that high sort of rock area. So I'm singing some low notes here, which is admittedly fairly out of my range, so apologies in advance. But the way that I'm processing these is really adding something to them. I'm just going to play them raw to start off with, and then we're going to take a look at processing across the entire spectrum. So here I'm singing the G and the A again in the lower octave. Again. It's very low. It's really kind of out of my range. But I've got those panned centrally first and foremost because they're in that lower octave. And then I'm doing something quite unique to them. I'm using Logic for this. You can use any DAW, obviously. But within Logic, we have this sub-bass feature. It's within the specialized menu and sub-bass over here. And what we can do with this is we can essentially create another octave underneath. If we just take a look at this, I've got the wet up to almost 100%, so the actual lower octave is almost as loud as the original octave. Take a listen to these two with that extra octave below added, and this really adds another dimension to it. I'm just going to turn it up a little bit so you can really hear it. Again. So without. Again. And then I'll bring it in halfway through. Again. It almost sounds like a double bass just in that low end. I can't sing anywhere near that low, and not a lot of people can. So having the ability to add that with a plugin is super helpful. And I'm doing this in a few different ways with plugins throughout the whole session, and adding a little bit of extra something that I wouldn't actually be able to do with my voice. So let's take a look at that now. First off, let's remind ourselves of what the full vocal sounds like, and then we're going to take a look at what plugins I've got on a bus level on these vocals. Again. Okay, on this vocal bus then, I've got two processors. First off, I've got a compressor, which is just knocking off a few dB. If I bring it into graph mode, you'll be able to see this a bit easier. Just watch that I'm not really taking off too much, just 3 or 4 decibels, just to even things out just a touch. Again. So just this bit here, it's not even bringing it down, I don't know, it's maybe 2 dB. Again. Yeah, 3 dB at most. I'm using this vintage opto compressor that you get with Logic. I like it. Optos tend to be kind of smooth and quite slow, so it works well on a group. I'm not compressing any of these vocals on their own. I'm just putting them all into this bus and then compressing the bus. There's one other thing that I've got on this bus now, and this is a little bit of a unique plugin. So this is Fresh Air. This is from Slate Digital. This is actually a free plugin. A lot of the plugins I'm using here are free or stock. Some are going to be paid for. We'll get onto that in a moment. And this is just a top end, a harmonic exciter. So you're just really getting some of that real crispy high end. Let's take a listen to it with it on and then with it off. And you're going to hear a difference just in that vocal sheen. It really adds an extra dimension to it. Again. With it off. Again. Then back on. Again. It just adds that extra little bit of sizzle, which helps these backing vocals just poke through the mix just a touch. And it's something beautiful to put on a bus. You don't have to go crazy. I've just gone up to 16% on each of the bands. I've linked the bands, and it's just helping to add that extra bit of top. You can use a harmonic exciter for this. You can even use just a standard EQ. It's not going to be exactly the same, but as this is free, it's worth picking it up. Okay, let's talk about effects then. Let's talk about how we're taking these vocal stacks from 80% and getting them to 100%. Two of the most important vocal effects you can have are reverb and delay. And I've got those on here. I've got a vocal verb bus and then a vocal delay bus. I've got an Aussie bus, which we're going to talk about in a moment. I've got a pitch left and a pitch right as well. These are all unique in their own way. The reverb is probably doing the most, and then the delay is backing that up. It's quite a fair amount there as well. Let's bring in that reverb and just hear what it's doing. Again. It's the tail, isn't it? It's not necessarily a massive difference when the actual vocal is there, but when it tails off, you can really hear this ethereal kind of inside a church kind of sound. Take one more listen. Again. These kind of effects are really important with backing vocals, and often you can put more effects on the backing vocal than you can on the lead vocal because they sit back a little bit. They sit off to the sides. You can often affect them and it won't be as noticeable as if you put that much reverb on a lead vocal. So having a nice large reverb on the backing vocals is essential. The reverb I'm actually using for this is from Slate Digital again. This is from the Verb Suite Classics, and this is just the Rich Vocal Hall. You can use any kind of reverb here. Pick what sounds right for your track. You could use your stock plugins. You could use something if you've got something else that's paid. Isotope do some really great reverbs. Waves do some fun reverbs. The Plates. There's loads out there. Choose whatever it is that suits you. For me, at the moment, I'm using this Slate Digital. Second up then is the delay, and I think this is so important. Let's take a listen to it with this delay engaged, and you'll hear again just at the tails, you'll just get that repeat. Again. A really like otherworldly kind of sound there. It just adds that extra dimension again, as I say, and it just brings it up so much. It's so important to have these effects on a vocal. If you've got a reverb and no delay, then it's kind of part of the way there, but I think having the two in tandem really does something super special. So what's this Ozzy nonsense then? Well, there's a famous Ozzy Osbourne. His vocal effect is that he has some kind of chorus on there, and he also has some stuff going on different in the left and the right. So he'll have either a treble tracked vocal or he'll have something that's been copied. And first off, he'll have a chorus on there. Let's take a listen to just this chorus bus on its own. It's just adding that little bit of movement, that little bit of warble again. So when you bring that in with everything, again, it's barely noticeable, but it's just there enough. If you wanted to bring that up a bit more so you get more of that kind of chorus sound, let's select all of these kind of secondary vocals and bring it up just a bit more. We've already got it on the lead over here. Let's see how that sounds. Again. And then without. Again. With again. Again. It adds just a little bit of movement to the sound, and it adds a little bit of a unique quality to it. So by doing this on a bus as opposed to doing it on each individual channel, you create a kind of idea of homogeny. If everything's going into that bus, then everything sounds a bit more together. I'm not really doing anything on any individual channels. It's just at that kind of bus level. And that is quite an important part of this. I'm not actually individually mixing any channels, just on the bus. I've just got that compressor on the bus, fresh air on the bus, and these are all going to separate sends. Now, these pitch versions are a little bit unique as well, and they sound a little bit off on their own, but once you bring them into the mix, they give you that extra Ozzy Osbourne-ness. Let's take a listen. So, on their own, again, little bit of that kind of warbling sound. I've got one of them over to the left and one of them over to the right. The one that's going to the right is 12 cents sharp, 12 cents up, and the one on the left-hand side is 13 cents flat. So I'm actually detuning these, and then I'm taking them to 100%. So I've not got any of the original vocal in there. I've just got the detuned version. And again, this is not a massive part of a sound. This is just an extra little bit of something off to the left and right. Let's hear it without, and then let's hear it with, and see exactly what it's doing. Again. Again. Let's bring that up just a touch. Again. There it is, that famous Ozzy kind of warble. Off to the left and right, it just adds an extra dimension, an extra little bit of pitchiness, chorusiness, and it just makes a little bit of difference, and it adds to that whole massive vocal sound. So those takes that you've heard throughout this, they were kind of the A takes, if you want. They were the good ones. There were some that I did that weren't quite as in time as the others. We're going to take a listen to these now and see how we can make these vocal takes more in time, how we can lock these vocal takes in, because that is a really important part of this. If you've got harmonies that aren't tight together, you might as well not have them in there. It's so important to have them tight. I'm going to show you how to do it. So here it is when they're a little bit loose. Again. So we've got some bass stuff that's too long. We've got some bits that aren't quite in time. This one's a little bit early. They're all not quite coming in the right place. As we're in Logic, we can use flex mode. Most modern DAWs will have a way of moving vocals around. So I'm going to show you some techniques that will be transferable to different DAWs, not just in Logic. So we can see our flex markers here. I can just drag these so they're all at the same point. So if I just get these first ones so they're exactly the same, or more or less exactly the same. If they're not exactly the same, then it kind of adds to that whole idea of it being, you know, a group of people. It makes it a bit more believable. But having it so that it's more or less identical is quite a good start. So I've moved this first one. The consonants are going to be the most important part. If I don't change the same note at the same time as in these, it's not going to be as noticeable, but having these starting bits of the notes right where I need them is very, very crucial. I'm going to come on to the ends of notes in just a second, but let's take a listen and just see if that's made it a bit more together. Yeah, perfect. Love it. Okay, so the ends of the notes then, I'm just going to drag these so that the notes all end at the same place. I want to use one as a kind of a control, so I'm just looking at this one. Seems to be a good spot around there, so I'm going to make them all match these. I can just bring these out so they're all, that's fine, create a high speed section. Let's bring these all out so they're about at the same point. Let's take a listen. As I said, it's not the case that you need them to be absolutely 100% perfect, because no vocalist sings exactly the same every time. It adds to that whole element that is a number of people singing and not just you singing in front of a microphone a load of times, which obviously it actually is, but you don't want to let anyone know that. Again. Loads better. So this kind of effect can be used in so many different genres, and creating this kind of soundscape is a really useful way of adding some depth to the track, and knowing a little bit about that music theory is going to be helping you along the way. If you can find out what key your track is in, what key the track you're mixing is in, or if you're writing it, perhaps you already know, and then work out what your root of the scale is, that'll be what key the song is in, and then you can get your perfect fifth and your major third above those, and they're going to help to just pad that out and create this stereo soundscape that we've created here. I hope that's been useful for you. Please check out the rest of the channel, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks a lot, take care.